I'm here at the scene of the crime spree, right behind me.
Vice Mayor Strange, you'll address her properly.
You can kiss my foot.
Mr. Rickard, you're out of order.
FBI, we are asking you to investigate this council. Please look into this council, how they award contracts, the bid process, how they use their positions to benefit their friends and themselves, how they use their positions to attack residents and critics and neighbors and business competition. FBI, will you please look into this?
And I welcome the FBI here. If you notice, Mr. Thompson, with his plea for the FBI and his watchdog group, this city runs the cleanest in this whole county. I guarantee
He was served a federal subpoena this morning.
We did receive a subpoena this morning, and we're going to cooperate 100% with the subpoena.
And most of you who were involved up here, you gaslighted me. You tried to say I was crazy. And now we know that that's not true. And there's a lot of other issues I've been asking about as well.
So I have in my hands here, this is the transcript of the cross-examination of former city manager Michael White, the Lynn Haven city manager, who was indicted and pled guilty to being part of defrauding the city of, it was ultimately like $5 million that they know of, that they've got so far from, ECS, the story. But first of all, it's super interesting, the cross-examination of the prosecutor's main witness against developer James Finch, who is being tried, or was tried, it was a hung jury, on 2 counts. One, conspiracy to bribe a former city commissioner back in 2016, 2017 in the 17th Street Ditch Project, which James Finch financed himself, which Antonius Barnes wasn't present for the vote, and they got Michael White as the main witness. It does have parallels to the Manhattan prosecutor. Think about this: the Manhattan prosecutor wants to indict and prosecute Donald Trump for a non-crime in 2016, and the best evidence they have is a terrible witness in Michael Cohen. Think about this: the federal prosecutors want to prosecute and convict James Finch for a non-crime in 2016, and the only evidence they have is a terrible witness in Michael White. Unbelievable parallels. So, I want to read to you what happened. I'm just going to read to you most of it. I'll skip over some of the judge's instructions and some of the stuff like that. But all right, hold on to your seats. This is there are parts of this that are phenomenal. I'm going to read most of it. I'm going to show you some of the pages. But remember, Lynn Haven, you, the voters, can fix this mess. The corruption, the graft that has strangled Lynn Haven, because you've got an election coming up in 3 weeks. So before I get started, I want to remind you about 2 candidates that you got to put on there if you want to straighten things out. These are paid campaign ads, and you know how I feel about both of them. Judy Tinder is running for mayor of Lynn Haven. The city needs leadership now more than ever. A mayor who serves you rather than big contractors and consultants. As mayor, she'll lead the charge for accountability, starting with the police chief, the city manager, and code enforcement. It's time once again to treat you with the respect you deserve. Vote for Judy Tinder on or before April 18th. Brian Gray is running for Lynn Haven City Commission Seat 1. He wants to reform code enforcement so that everyone is treated equally for once. He rejects adopting the International Property Maintenance Code. Don't turn the city into a giant HOA. Vote for Gray on or before April 18th. Okay, so here's where it starts off. The prosecutors just put their main witness, Michael White, on the stand. Michael White said James Finch called Antonius Barnes the N-word, said that he'll dance for me. And he told me this, Michael White said, when I was talking to him at Sheffield Park, he needed the financing, right? He was hoping to get financing and he needed all the votes. And he told me, I got Barnes in my pocket. The financing had already been secured under the previous city manager. So Michael White told this to FBI agent Borghini in like 2019. But just the 2 days before the trial, 2 business days before the trial, just a couple weeks ago, Michael White said, look what I got. I got like 24 pages of my handwritten notes. And so they brought these in. So that opened the door to defense attorney Guy Lewis being able to ask him about these notes that magically appeared a couple days before trial. And it goes like this. So, Mr. Lewis, to take off where we left off, he says, so these notes, what's been admitted in evidence as number 18 just gets turned over to the FBI last week, correct? Thursday, Michael White says. Last week, Thursday? Yes. This is Guy Lewis cross-examining Michael White. And after that, they turned them over to the defense for the first time, correct? I don't know. You don't know that? I don't know if they turned them over to you. Okay. And then Michael White says, you'll have to answer that, sir. So the defense attorney looks at Judge Walker and says, Judge, I'd ask you to instruct the witness not to tell me. I'll have to answer something. Michael White says, I'm sorry. The court said just answer the questions, the judge said. So Judge Walker says, Mr. Lewis, you can proceed. Thank you. You told the jury that you have reviewed all the FBI notes, right? I have reviewed the things that they sent to me through a file access portal. Didn't you just tell the jury 2 minutes ago that you reviewed all the FBI reports? I have reviewed the reports that they sent me through the file sharing. That's what I was referring to. You've also reviewed the FBI notes, correct? I have reviewed the FBI notes that they have sent to me through the file sharing program. Are you trying to suggest to the jury that you weren't supplied all the FBI notes? Is that why you are answering the question that way? I cannot answer the question because I don't know all the notes they have or anybody possibly could have. I only have the notes that they sent me. Do you have any reason to believe that they didn't send you all the notes and all the FBI reports that Special Agent Borghini did? Any reason whatsoever? I can't answer that. No. The question is, do you have any reason to believe? Has anybody made you believe or suggested to you that they didn't send you everything? I don't know. Why don't you know? I don't understand that. I cannot determine if somebody has sent me everything they have in their possession. I only know the notes that I have read was through the file transfer portal that they sent me, that information. I've read some of those things. Those notes, and he's talking about now, Guy Lewis is talking about the ones that Michael White suddenly submitted a couple days before trial. There was no date on them. They were handwritten, and a lot of us believe he just wrote them up recently. It's kind of what they've been doing throughout this whole trial, throughout this whole case. And so the defense attorney says, those notes, they're not dated, are they? You have them in front of you? Which notes are you talking about, sir? Do we have a hard copy, please? The notes on the screen. Yes. Yes, sir. They're not dated, says Michael White. Because, of course, Michael White didn't date him. He just scribbled a bunch of stuff down and made sure to say that James Finch was, a racist. So you did know what notes I was talking about, surely. Well, they just came up on the screen, sir. Okay. Well, 8D, you know what note? Listen, let me ask questions and you answer them. 8D in front of you are 23 pages of what appears to be handwritten notes, right? Yes, sir. And your testimony under oath is that you just let the FBI know about these last week, correct? I met with the FBI on Wednesday to prepare for this trial. It's Monday now. And we got to talking and was talking about the notes. I forgot what you call them that the FBI writes up and all. I said those. I'm sorry to interrupt you. But my question was, last week, for the first time, you let the FBI know about these notes, yes or no? I was trying to tell you that, sir. I understand, but it's a yes or no question. Yes or no, did you just turn them over to the FBI last week? Yes, sir. You just let the FBI know about the notes last week for the first time? I was just asked and I told them about the notes. Yes, sir. But I thought you told the jury that your plea agreement required you to tell the FBI everything, whether they asked you or not. Didn't you tell the jury that during your direct questioning? Yes, sir, and I did. That's where these notes came from back in 2019. Just like Vicky Gaynor's handwritten notes. They had all these handwritten notes for the trial now, back in 2019. The defense attorney, right. But they don't appear. They claim that there's no report that says you have these notes, is there, in 2019? And Michael White says, if you will look at probably some of the FBI transcripts when they took my, it will go along with these notes. That's what, we'll get to that. Because the FBI report in 2019 does look very much like your notes. I'll agree with you on that, but it doesn't have the N-word. I told them I can't help what he writes. I can't help what the FBI guy writes. I told him about it, though, back in 2019. So are you telling the jurors that the FBI agent did not write it down? You didn't see it in the 2019 report, did you? Yes, sir. I'm telling the jury without a doubt that the N-word was told back in 2019 when I met with Agent Borghini. Even when it came up in the newspaper, a different story. Objection, Judge, says the defense attorney. Sustained. Non-responsive move to strike, asked the jury to be instructed to disregard the non-responsive portion, and the judge obliges, strikes it, tells the jury to disregard the newspaper comment. Now, you sat down in 2019 with the FBI, correct? Yes, sir. And you've had the chance now to review those reports, correct? Yes, sir. There's nothing in the reports about Mr. Finch using the N-word, is there? I did not see it, no, sir. You looked for it, didn't you? Yes, sir. Because let's talk about timing. For the first time back in December, you had a hearing and you appeared for that hearing, correct? Yes, sir. And that was the first time you had testified under oath in this case, correct? Yes, sir. We called you. Judge had a hearing and the defense called you as a witness, not the government, correct? Yes, sir. In fact, the government in that hearing, I don't think had any questions asked of you. Do you recall that? They did not. So in that hearing in December 22, for the first time, I asked you some questions about some text messages, correct? You did. And I pulled out handwritten text messages that you've talked about today, correct? Some. And those text messages were between you and the chief of police of Lynn Haven, correct? I can't remember who, but they was between me and someone. I'd have to look at it to verify. Those text messages, while I'm getting those text messages came from your phone, correct? My personal phone, yes, sir. Does it matter whether it was? Yes, I had if I can ask, a phone number. I'm sorry. Judge doesn't want us to talk over each other. Yes, sir. You had a personal phone, correct? Yes. You also had a government phone? No, sir. Okay, so the personal phone was seized when you were arrested on the aggravated domestic violence charge, correct? I gave it to them. They did not ask for it. I gave it to them. The Bay County Sheriff's Office arrested you. They'd come out and arrest you. You were at the hospital, I believe, correct? Yes, sir. They brought you in and you were telling the jury that you just handed over your phone voluntarily. Yes, I did, sir. I did that because there's text messages between my wife and I that we was in an argument. I was trying to explain, and they took my phone then. Well, they were trying to gather evidence, correct? I imagine they were. I can't answer for them. Did they seize the gun? Yes. The gun, by the way. So, evidently, Michael White got into it with his wife, and there was a 40 caliber handgun involved. Guess where he got the gun? Police Chief Ricky Ramey took it out of the evidence locker and gave it to Michael White so Michael White could have a gun. Back in 2019. The gun that Michael White, that was involved in the aggravated domestic charge against Michael White between him and his wife, was given to him out of the evidence locker by Chief Ramey. Chief Ramey told Judge Walker, so what? I've given judges guns before out of the evidence locker. On December 12th, Chief Ricky Ramey told Judge Walker, I've given judges guns out of the evidence locker. To which defense attorney Guy Lewis looked at him and said, I didn't ask you that, and I don't know why you would say that. Out of the evidence locker. It's common, it's normal. Okay. So it goes on. Okay, so they were gathering evidence. I imagine they were. I can't answer that for them. Did they seize the gun? Yes. And this was the gun that you had pointed at yourself, correct? Correct. The prosecution, objection, Your Honor. The defense attorney says it was brought up. Judge said, he said he seized the gun. Let's move on to a new topic. Okay, where was your wife at the time when you were arrested? She was at a friend's house. Commissioner Dan Russell's house? Yes. Well, that's interesting. You showed the FBI, the Bay County Sheriff's Office detective started showing them snapshots on your phone, correct? You started showing the Bay County investigators. I did. And they eventually then seized your phone, right? I gave it to them. Well, they also then got a search warrant for your phone, right? I can't remember. I can't remember what the search warrant. I don't know. I know it was for the seizing of the gun. They did that. And you were then arrested for the aggravated domestic battery, correct? Yes, sir. And those texts that we've talked about between you and your wife, you brought it up. She had looked on your phone, correct? No, this text was about me and my wife arguing. She was arguing about you and the female lady and some texts you were sending back and forth, correct? Some of those texts, no, sir, but some earlier, a long time before that, yes, sir. And the other texts that we're talking about, were a series of, and you've not looked at, you are telling the jury since our December hearing, you have not looked at any of those text messages, or have you? I've not looked at the text messages, no, sir. Did you ever see the 31,000 pages of text messages? No, sir. Even after you were cross-examined about those text messages, you never, and no one showed them to you? I never did want to look at them. Well, let's talk about them. There were text messages between you and the chief of police, correct? And that was, I texted the chief of police. Yes, sir. And that was Ricky Ramey, correct? And Matt Reimer, he says, and Matt Reimer. So at the time of the hurricane, Ricky Ramey was the assistant police chief. And just so you know, and Matt Reimer was the police chief himself. So he also was texting with Matt Raymer, the chief of police. All right, I'm going to tell you more about this. I'm going to read you the cross-examination of Michael White, the rest of this right after this.
Is your past ruining your future? Having your record sealed or expunged wipes the slate clean, providing you with a new opportunity in life. I'm Al Saulene, your Panama City Beach lawyer. 215-0628.
Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777. All right, so the defense attorney cross-examining Michael White. Then you brought in, let's not talk over each other because Michael White was eager to answer. You brought up Chief Ramey. You brought Chief Ramey in after the hurricane, right? No, it was before. Okay, but you brought him in, correct? Yeah, he had come in. So Michael White recruited Chief Ramey from the sheriff's office. And you'd known him for years? Michael White, you've known Chief Ramey for years? I coached his kids in T-ball. Just like you had known Mickey White for years. Yes, sir. Have you and Chief Ramey talked about, and I was questioning you back in December about these text messages, correct? Yes, sir. And in several of the text messages I showed you on the stand, you had written not a claim that you had said, but you had written the N-word in several of those text messages, right, Michael White? I can't remember several. I remember one that I did. And as I told you before, Michael White looking right at the jury every time he answers a question. I do apologize for that. He told the jury half black. That's poor judgment and ignorance on my part, and I shouldn't have done it. And this is the same time that you were an alcoholic, correct? Yes, sir. You were bipolar, correct? Yes, sir. I was bipolar at the time. And you were mixing, you know that from mixing the two, it's a very dangerous situation. Yes, sir. You become violent as part of the bipolar. Yes, sir. Jumping back a little bit, you were asked by the prosecutor about working for the co-op. Do you remember that? So Michael White worked for the Gulf Coast Electric Co-op. It's I think it's kind of like Florida Power and Light type thing, right? And so he had worked there. He had been the CEO of it for more than 20 years before he came to Panama, to Lynn Haven as the city manager. So the question is, why did he leave that job as the CEO is where the defense attorney is going. Do you remember that? Yes, sir. 23 years. I remember. And at that hearing, you had implied to the chief judge that you resigned, correct? I did. And in fact, I had suggested that you were fired and you corrected me, right? I did. You didn't say anything about anything at that hearing about having this meeting, about cussing and showing yourself. That's how you describe it, as showing yourself and then apologizing. You didn't mention any of that, did you? No. Nobody usually wants to tell their bad dirt in front of everybody. I don't. My point, sir, as I go through here, isn't it a fact that your memory is often selective? No, sir. So, but do you admit that you left that testimony out at the hearing back in December? As I said, a lot of people, I don't like my dirty laundry being showcased out in front of everyone. How many times were you prepped by the government before you testified today? I met with them Wednesday for about an hour or 2 hours. I'm noticing that every time you answer, you're looking over at the jury. Did anybody at the government's table ever tell you that's a good thing to do? Yes, they mentioned talking to the jury, but I also want to talk to the jury because I want them to know I'm telling the truth. So the government told you when I ask a question, turn and look at the jury, look at them. I think I've looked at the jury all my testimony. I agree with that, but somebody from, that wasn't my question. Somebody from the government told you to do that? They didn't tell me to do it. They said it's good to get eye contact with the jury. Why? because they're going to be the ones deciding this case, not the lawyers. All right, back to the text messages, sir. You were also asked back in December about setting up people. Do you remember that? You and the chief of police had exchanged some messages. I remember you saying something about that, but I never did see the words set up. Maybe you can show me the text. I will. Okay. I will. You denied it at the hearing that there were any kinds of those text messages, correct? I can't remember. You also couldn't remember using the N-word initially, correct? I don't remember that. In fact, you also didn't remember even sending the text messages, correct? What text messages? Can you be specific? As you said, I text a lot. There were many pages. I don't know which one you're talking about specifically. Okay. If you show it to me, I can answer you. Yes, sir, I will. And then, Judge, may I approach the witness? So he, to refresh the recollection, Judge Walker says, yeah. And the defense attorney, Guy Lewis, shows Michael White some papers. Let me show you a download of Michael White's phone. I know it's a lot. Well, this is only a portion of it. Okay, take a look at the first page and tell me if that refreshes your recollection about a series of texts between you, Michael White, and back in 2018. You see your name there, Michael White? I do. And you see Ryan Shipes? Yep. And those are texts on a phone from your phone, correct? That's correct, my personal phone. Is there a difference between your personal phone and whether it's a government phone? Yeah, I don't want everybody in the city to call my personal phone number. So I got a Google number, and I had a Google number that was printed on my cards. And the Google number is when I did business for the city. That's what the primary number I used. Did I use my personal number at times for city business? Yes, I did. Again, going through, let's take a look at some of these specifics. Here's one between Ricky Ramey and you, Michael White. And you know that's Ricky Ramey. Were you all talking about fixing somebody's ticket, correct? That was a ticket for, sir, my question is this. Does that refresh your recollection that you texted with Ricky Ramey, number one? Yes. And you'd asked me earlier, show you the one that says about fixing a ticket. It says, tell them not to worry about the ticket, correct? The prosecution says, objection, Your Honor, that's improper impeachment. Now, here's what that means. What the defense attorney is doing is trying to show the jury that he's a bad witness. He's trying to impeach his character. And within certain parameters, he's allowed to. The prosecutor says he's being improper at this point. The judge says, sustained, don't read the document. You can either admit it or you can refresh his recollection. So there's a lot of this in the next few pages. I'm going to skip some of it. But what was happening is what the defense attorney was reading had not been submitted as evidence, but he's allowed to use it to show the witness and say, does this refresh your recollection? If it is submitted as evidence, he can read from it. If it's not submitted as evidence, he can paraphrase it maybe or show it to, but he can't read it exactly, or it's entered into the record when it's not evidence. So there's a lot of this back and forth, and the prosecutors keep objecting because the defense attorney is either reading it or Michael White's reading it, and the judge is sustaining those. All right, so let's get through some of this. All right, so the judge is talking to the jury and explaining what I just explained to you. And the judge says, Mr. Lewis, you may proceed. Thank you, Judge. Let's see, going through, asking what they can see. That's not admitted. So the prosecutors object. The judge says, what's your good faith objection to showing a certain document? And the judge tells the prosecutors, look, I'm not going to have both of you talking to me at once, one at a time here. No multiple lawyers. And they're still going back and forth about what the defense attorney is allowed to ask. The judge is taking both of the attorney's comments before he rules. And then defense attorney Guy Lewis begins again. So going back to what's on your screen, only he can see it, which is part of Exhibit 87, and I'm currently referring to a particular page. First of all, you identified that as Ricky Ramey, a text between you and Chief Ramey, correct? Yes, sir. And that's an authentic record copy of the text that occurred between you and the chief, correct? I can't answer that, says Michael White, but I remember that. You say you remember it? I remember it. Yes, sir. Do you have any reason to think it's not authentic? No, sir, but I can't confirm it either. Didn't you just say that you had a text, you had a phone, correct? Yes, sir. And you use it to text? Yes, sir. Use it to text between you and Ricky Ramey? If that's per se my phone, I'll agree with it. Whose phone would it be from? I didn't download this. I don't know. Objection, Your Honor, says the prosecutor. And they go on back and forth. And the judge says, again, so to be clear, without reading it into the record, you're showing the witness and asking if it refreshes his recollection. Back and forth, back and forth. Don't read it into the record. Yes, sir. And then Michael White says, yes, I see my phone number. And so there's no question what I've been talking to you about is the actual text between you and the former or the current chief of police of Lynn Haven. There's no question about that, right? Well, if I take yours and put it up here and compare it side by side, I could give it a confirmation. Okay, in those text messages, do you remember, does it refresh your recollection by looking at what I've shown you? Objection, Your Honor, says the prosecutor. He's reading the messages again. So did you tell, in fact, from where we started on this thing, did you tell the chief, I'll tell him not to worry, don't worry about the ticket, correct? The text exchange occurred. You can scroll up just a little bit. Yeah, I said, Michael White says, the chief and Michael White were fixing a ticket for a buddy, okay? And Michael White's being difficult on the stand. He finally says, yeah, I said, I tell him, don't worry about the ticket. Then I said, correct, that's a question. And you remember him responding, correct? Yes. And they go back and forth with this stuff. Now, defense attorney says, you've mentioned Miss Anderson, Mayor Anderson, several times. And you've also mentioned cursing out people at your prior job. Do you remember that testimony? It wasn't at the job. It was actually here in Tallahassee, just down the street at a bar. And that cursing people and showing yourself resulted ultimately in a lawsuit that you had to testify in while you were at the co-op, right? No, sir. Do you remember the discrimination lawsuit that was filed against the co-op? That was nothing to do with that. That was a long time before that. That was for me not giving a lady a job. That was the discrimination. There was nothing to do with that. I cussed someone out at a different co-op that's down in South Florida. But you do recall the lawsuit where you failed to promote women and you were sued. The co-op was sued. Objection, Your Honor, says the prosecution. Overruled. You said, yes, you did, correct? I was part of a lawsuit. Yes, sir. And you told the judge at this hearing back in December that you resigned that position, correct? I did. You actually had to resign. Isn't that correct? They gave me an option. Right. So I resigned. I chose. The option was either get fired or resign. I resigned. No, not my question. The option was that they gave you either get fired or resign. As I said, I had a choice. I resigned. Judge, I'd ask you to direct the witness to answer the question. The judge says he did in a roundabout way. Okay. Ask your next question. Yes, sir. Mayor Anderson was obviously a female, correct? Yes. And you had problems with her being a strong, forceful woman, didn't you? No, sir, I did not. Well, I believe you told the jury earlier in your testimony that the reason you had trouble with her is she would told you to do things and she wanted it done quickly. That does not mean that I have a problem with that. That was another female on the commission as well. There wasn't there? Judy Tinder, correct? Correct. And do you recall exchanging a text message with Chief Ramey about her as well? Yes, sir. The first part of the text message, you'll recall, was a Facebook post, and it was from Mayor Anderson, correct? I can't. Yeah, you'll have to show me. Okay. And let's go to that one. Let's pull that one up on the screen for Michael White. And they go through this game again. I have to see the text. Let's put the text up. Blah blah blah. Does that refresh your recollection about the exchange you and Chief Ramey had about Commissioner Judy Tinder? And it's the most vulgar exchange imaginable, correct? Objection, Your Honor, says the prosecution. The defense says judge, and the court says overruled. It is the most inappropriate, foul, vile language that a person could imagine, correct? Are you talking to me? Michael White said that. Are you talking to me? Because Guy Lewis was looking at the jury when he asked the question. Guy Lewis says, yes, sir. Oh, I didn't know, Michael White said. You didn't know I was talking to you? Well, you was looking that way. I didn't know. Okay, well, the question was, and the answer Michael White gives is, it depends on who's reading the words. I would say it's not nice, but I didn't say it. Remember, it was Chief Ramey who said those words. All right, so it goes on. Another question. Well, you'll recall, and tell me if I'm wrong, if I need to refresh your recollection again. You refer that Chief Ramey referred to, you were talking about Mayor Anderson, and then I believe you said this lady knows how to push my buttons, correct? I was talking about Judy Tinder, I think. Okay, and then Chief Ramey, objection, Your Honor. Sustained. Don't read the document. You can just ask him, isn't it true that, he said X? And the defense attorney says, I don't want to use the language. You remember the language that Chief Ramey put when he texted Michael White and called Commissioner Tinder. You remember, like the C word, all that stuff, right? And the judge says, we live in the real world. We're all adults. Just use the language. And the defense attorney says, is it true that you said, the Chief Ramey said to you when you said, what's her problem besides being a bitch? Objection, Your Honor. Do you recall that? It's not his statement. The judge says, sustained. You're asking him what somebody else said. Because remember, that's what Chief Ramey said. All right. And you recall the chief saying, what's her problem besides being a bitch? That's Chief Ramey texting. Objection, Your Honor. Sustained as to what the other individual said unless he agreed with it. Well, actually, you did respond afterwards. You didn't disagree. You'll recall that you didn't disagree with the chief's characterization, whatever it was, right? I didn't say anything about it. Well, then he indicated the chief referred to, you'll call it the court. Sustained as to what the chief said. All right, let's get back to what Michael White said the judge. And then you said, I'm tired of it. Do you recall saying that? Absolutely. I am tired of it. And that was after the chief said, objection, Your Honor. You've made your point, says the judge. Did you ever use that kind of language about a woman and her parts and things like that? I've cussed. I've said about everything that you can think of in the book, and I apologized for it. And this was all, this isn't today, but this is back in 2018. And you're testifying your memory that goes back as far as 2016, 17, 18, correct? You remember all the way back that far. Somewhere in there. Am I wrong about the years? I would say that you're close. Some of the things you said were a lot earlier than that. Okay. Do you think your memory of the events was better then or better now? Well, like most people, we tend to forget a lot as time goes on. This is the government's main witness, the prosecutor's main witness about a non-crime regarding James Finch in 2016. And the witness is saying, yeah, I forget things as time goes on. Back to the screen, says the defense attorney. And at this point, the judge says, look, let's take a break. All right. So we come back in, and the judge is now talking to the jury's out. The witness is out. It's just the judge now talking to the parties. And he's talking about this note that was submitted by Michael White just days before the trial that accused Finch of being a racist. And here's what Judge Walker told to the parties. It's only being brought up and discussed in light of the sudden epiphany, like Saul on the road to Damascus, that Mr. White discovered these notes and turned them over just now. So Judge Walker is saying, look, man, you guys submit these notes late. You got to expect tough cross-examination. You can't just turn in notes late, calling a guy a racist, and don't expect tough cross-examination, is what the judge is telling. And he said, just as the defense doesn't get to stipulate away the government's case, the government's witness doesn't get to stipulate away the stink in the room. He said, the skunk's already out. And then Judge Walker was talking to one of them about, I don't know why you're shaking your head. No, like you've got some kind of medical condition. That's what Judge Walker said. All right. So now we are back to, the jury's back in the room. We've had our break. And the defense attorney, Guy Lewis, is asking questions of Michael White. Do you recall the text messages that had the N-word in it? The one I wrote? I remember that. And do you admit sending those text messages back and forth? I don't know about those, but I remember using the N-word. Okay. In your text, in writing with the chief of police, I can't remember who it was with. Okay. And you'll agree that you and the chief of police, current chief of police, also talked about setting up people. No. May I approach, Judge? You may. I'd ask you to read just to yourself, sir, says the judge. So now the defense attorney has walked up to the witness and he's showing him the text to refresh his recollection about he and Chief Ramey setting people up. All right. You said you set up a lady and used the words, let's set her up. Let's set her ass up. No, that ain't what the text says. Please see if this refreshes your recollection. And he shows it to him. And Michael White says, oh, I thought you were talking about over here. The line that says, and I'm not going to say it, the line I'm pointing to right here, let's set her ass up. In fact, I think I have this page for you to see. Yeah, here we go. Look at this. Okay, I haven't gotten to this part yet, so I'll bring it back on here in a minute, but it is remarkable. Remarkable. Yeah, this is it. Okay. Wow. This is an admission that Michael White told Chief Ramey to arrest a woman for what crime? Are you ready to see this? Look at this. I told him, this is Michael White now, let's set her ass up. That's what it says. And it wasn't referring to actually setting someone up. It was referring to set her up to actually go ahead and arrest her because she wouldn't quit. The woman they're talking about was seeing Michael White's friend. Michael White's the city manager, the boss of the police chief. and at the time, Ramey was the assistant police chief. Matt Raymer was the police chief, and Matt Raymer also approves of this. So what crime did she commit? This woman who was seeing Michael White's friend, and then they got tired of her. And you know how it is when you have an affair outside of marriage. Okay. And she was starting to cause problems to Michael White's friend. So Michael White said it was referring to set her up to actually go ahead and arrest her. For what crime? Because she wouldn't quit. That's what crime. Unbelievable. And then the questions changed. They on to a different subject. James Finch, remember, he's the one on trial here. You're trying to act like he's the Bonnie and Clyde, the Clyde side of the Bonnie and Clyde of Bay County, bribing everybody, getting rich. And is it James Finch never bribed you? No. Never paid you money? No. Okay. Do you recall actually texting back and forth between you and James Finch? Michael White says, I don't think Finch does text messages. And it goes on about, well, you talked about James Finch in text messages. Okay, yeah. Let me get to where there's something interesting here. Because Michael White's being, difficult again. I got to see the exact text. They're going back and forth. All right. So to further clarify, I think you told the jury that certainly at this time, mentally, physically, you were in a bad place. Do you remember that? I didn't say that. I just said I was struggling with bipolar and alcohol. Do you have any recollection of texting again a friend that you were in a bad place in your life? I need to see the text message. Okay. Is it fair to say that you won't agree with me on any of these texts until you see them? That's correct, because I can't remember exactly. And you mentioned earlier 30-something thousand texts. I can't remember every one of them. That's the reason I'm asking you. I appreciate that. But at any point after, especially after the December hearing, where text messages were brought up, you remember that, right? Yes, sir. The original text messages, do you know whose possession they're in? I'd imagine the government's, the prosecutors. And at any point prior to today's hearing, did they sit down with you and go through that one by one? Should have said trial. No, sir. Do you know why? I don't know. Did objection, says the prosecutors, sustained. Don't ask the witness why the government does what it does. Okay. Yes, sir. Did the specific agent from the FBI, let me ask you this. How many times did you meet with the government prior to your testimony today? Like I mentioned earlier, 8, 10, somewhere. I'm just guessing. I didn't write down every one of them. And the plea agreement itself requires you to be available almost without restriction, correct? Yes, sir, to tell the truth. The plea agreement itself always requires you to be available to the government, correct? And to tell the truth. Yes, sir. Okay. And even without your attorney being present, you've got to, there's a statement in there, something even without the lawyer. Yeah. So if they call you, since you took the plea, if they call you, then you've got to be available. I have to make myself available. Do you have any recollection of texting back and forth with Ben Lee? Yes, I've texted with Ben. And do you recall texting Ben, telling him in your words, I need a lot of money? Can you show me the text, please? Yes. Bring it up on the screen for him, please. Who is Ben Lee? A banker for the city? Okay, now, excuse me, the Derwin that you've mentioned to the ladies and gentlemen is Derwin White, correct? Correct. No relation to you, Michael White? No, sir. And no relation to Mickey White, correct? No, sir. Mickey White was the owner of ECS, correct? So Mickey White is the nephew of Derwin White, but he's not related to Michael White on the stand. And he's the man that you had known for a long time, correct? I've known him for a while, yes, sir. And you brought him in as the owner of ECS, right? So Michael White brought in Ricky Ramey, He brought in Mickey White with the new company, ECS, Erosion Control Specialists. And he says, the mayor, I, and the lawyer did. Yes, sir. ECS, but do you know whether or not Mayor Anderson had any relation with Mickey White? Back in October of 2018. Do I know? Yes. You have to ask them that. Do you have any independent knowledge that she knew him? She talked to him regular. So once again, to get the correct answer, you ought to ask her and him. Right. But you're the one that brought him in, correct? Huh? You were the one that brought Mickey White in. Yes, to talk with us. Yes. Yes, and Mickey White owned ECS, correct? Correct. And Mickey White wound up having all the contracts work to pick up the debris, correct? Not all of it. No, sir. Almost all of it? No, sir. To the tune of millions of dollars, right? Yes, sir. And you wrote those checks, correct? No, sir, I didn't write them. Well, they were coming out of the city's account, correct? Yes, sir. You were getting a register, correct? And the mayor as well. Yes, sir. You know, I didn't ask you that. Oh, I was just helping you. Michael White said, oh, I was just helping you. Still trying to throw Mayor Anderson under the bus. You know, look, he's going to be sentenced after this is over, depending on his performance. So he's trying to help. All right. Well, I understand you want to help. Okay. I asked you about what you did. Do you understand that? Yeah. You were the city manager, correct? Yes, sir. You had control over the departments, correct? Yes, sir. The mayor was a single vote on the commission, right? And also in charge of signing off on the registers. Yes, sir. Did you ask me that question? Did you hear me ask you that question? No, sir, but I was helping you. Michael White, no, sir, but I was helping you. I don't need your help, sir. Okay. I'd ask you to answer the question. The mayor had one vote on the commission, correct? Yes. You mentioned to counsel for the government that you had rented some property. You had a renter in your property, correct? Yes. And this was right after the hurricane, right? It was right before the hurricane. It was before the hurricane. I had renters in right before the hurricane, a couple of properties. And you needed that person out of your property, correct? Well, the home was destroyed. Not my question. You needed that person out of your house, right? The home was they could not live in the house, so they needed to leave. Yes, it was unsanitary. Has anybody from the government or anybody told you not to answer my questions? No, sir. I'm answering your questions. Do you understand the difference between a question that's just asking for a yes or no or one that requires an explanation? Well, I want to make sure that the jury hears the question framed right. That's what Michael White said. That's what Michael White said. I want to make sure the jury hears the question framed right. Do you recall in the course of those texts telling your wife that you hate yourself most of the time? Could you show me that, please? My question is, do you recall? If you don't, just tell the jury. I've said that in the past. All right. And then Michael White says, attribute to the bipolar. Yes, sir. Now, when you say bipolar, bipolar is a disorder, correct? Yes, sir. It's a mental and psychological disorder, right? Yes, sir. Nothing to be ashamed of. People have it, right? Yes, sir. But it causes people to lose a grasp on reality, doesn't it? Some people. It can cause people to hear or see things that aren't there. Isn't that correct? That's what they say. It can cause people to imagine scenarios that nobody else experiences, correct? I don't know that. It can also create ideas in your mind. I'm not aware of that. Well, you have gone, you told the jury, and you answered the questions from the prosecutor. You have gone to a psychiatrist and to a psychologist, correct? Correct. You've seen both, right? Yes. And actually, you've started a blog as a result of that, haven't you? Not as a result of that, no, sir. You started a blog? I have started a blog. Yes, sir, I have. And did you discuss this blog with the government? I told them about it Wednesday, that I've got a blog. I just mentioned it. When you did you tell them about it? Or when did you tell them about it? Wednesday. Do you know whether or not they've looked at it? I haven't a clue. Did they ask you questions? It's not for them. It's for me. Did they ask you questions about your blog? No. Do you remember in your blog saying February 15th, 2023, I felt a sense of pride when I was first indicted? Yes, sir. You also wrote in your blog, December of 19, you describe an experience how the devil personally had visited you, the devil. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm a religious man now, and a lot more religious than I was. And yes, that's my personal experience I was sharing. I'm sharing and trying to heal from what I've went through. And you describe in detail, you describe him as a he, and he comes over and hovers above you, right? Yes, sir. And he suffocated you? Yes, sir. You couldn't breathe? Absolutely. Amen to that. You also describe your encounter with the FBI in Alabama, right? In November. This is the government's witness against James Finch. You were working at a car dealership, right? I was working for one, yes, sir. And the FBI shows up. All right. So they're talking about all the charges against him and when he was arrested and how many pages the indictment was. And the question is, it talks about how you and others had stolen money from the city of Lynnhaven, right? I think I mentioned that earlier. Yes, sir. I understand that. But my question was yes or no. The indictment talks about how you and others had stolen money from the city of Lynnhaven, correct? Yes, sir. And not to the tune of $35,000, correct? I didn't say I stole $35,000. My question was not to the tune of $35,000, correct? Correct. So now it's going to get to where the defense attorney is going to ask about how much money Michael White and others stole from the city of Lynnhaven. And I will finish this right after this.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
It's a hot time in Florida, and my friend Ryan could make sure your air conditioning is running at peak efficiency. He could even install a new one, built to a higher standard, American standard. Find out more at pcairrepair.com. The indictment itself talks in terms of millions of dollars, correct? I think it's like 1.5 something. Actually, it goes up to, when you add it up, almost $5 million total, correct? No, I don't think so. The conspiracy that you were involved in involves ECS billing, cheating the city government, correct? Cheating FEMA, yes, sir. And lying about it by submitting false invoices. I was not aware of that. I was aware of my home. I was aware of what was done at my house. The other things I wasn't. So you're telling the jury that you're not responsible for that part? Oh, I'm responsible because, please, I ask you again, the judge doesn't want us to talk over each other. The indictment talks in terms of ECS and the theft that was occurring under your watch, correct? Yes. And you told the jury how Mr. Finch and others interviewed you, correct? I met with them, yes, sir. Mr. Finch never offered you anything, correct? No, sir. He didn't offer you any money? No, sir. He didn't offer you any position? No, sir. Nothing to influence you in any way, shape, or form? No, sir. You, on the other hand, were being bribed, correct? When? He said, when? What are you talking about? I mean, it's kind of open-end. Well, we're talking about the hurricane period that you were talking about on the direct examination from the prosecutors. I was given $35,000 as a gift, yes. And you understand that Mr. White, Mickey White, your friend, says it was $172,000. So Michael White says that Mickey White, the owner of ECS, Derwin White's nephew, gave him $35,000. Now, this is the money that was the sack of cash that Michael White dropped basically at the feet in the office of Chief Ricky Ramey, assistant police chief at the time, in his office. It was upstairs in that big mobile unit that Verizon provided. They had like 6 desks up there. Michael White drops off a bag of cash to Ricky Ramey, the chief. Hey, the assistant chief, can you hold on to this? I got a meeting I got to go to. Ramey says, what's this? Well, it's just some cash I got. Ramey said he didn't touch it, didn't count it. He just sort of watched it. A sack of cash. So Michael White says it's $35,000. In December, he said it was $10,000. But Mickey White has always maintained it was $172,000. Where did that money go? Objection, Your Honor, says the prosecutor. Hold on. The objection, hearsay, overruled. Do you know that or not? 172,000. Do you know that or not? I don't know what he said. I've not read his stuff. Have you talked to him? I've spoken to him. In fact, when you were first arrested, you were with him, correct? No. You had come down, excuse me, beg your pardon. Eventually you came down and you talked to Mickey White about the case, correct? Yeah, eventually. All right. And it goes on. Now the proffer that a proffer is like when the government says, okay, we're going to make a deal with you if you talk to us. The government asked you about a proffer. Do you remember that? Your very first meetings with the FBI, Agent Borghini. Do you remember that? Yes, sir. And that was around December 11, 2019, I would guess. At that point, you didn't mention anything about the text whatsoever in that proffer, did you? Text? What text? Any text. I didn't. They had my phone. I'm sure they had my text. I didn't have to ask. Well, you said to the jury that you read your reports before you came in here. Yes, but I didn't read all the texts. Did the reports, to your recollection, mention anything about texts? And it goes on about this. And getting a deal is a good benefit. I would see it as a benefit. Yes, sir. And then the question, you talked about Jimmy Stanford, who is corrupt people at the objection, Your Honor. Relevance. Sustained. May I rephrase? Judge says, yeah. You talked about law enforcement corruption, correct? In other words, when Mickey White talked to the FBI in December of 2019, Michael White told the FBI that, and he said it in, remember, this is Michael White now. He said it also to the judge in December that the sheriff's office, he says, is corrupt, and he says that Jimmy Stanford. All right, but that's judge says, look, let's stay kind of. I'm going to allow him to just explore general topics that I'm going to general topics that had nothing to do with this case, just to point out what it was. The discussions went beyond just the subject matter. So, in other words, the judge is saying, look, I'm going to let him, the defense attorney, talk to him about some of this stuff because it was in the FBI notes. So in that limited basis, you can ask some follow-up questions. You talked about law enforcement corruption, did you not? Yes. And you talked about actually you gave them some detail about how you got your ticket taken care of, your DUI ticket. Okay, then it goes on to some stuff about that. He ended up getting like a pretrial. This really is, I'm going to skip through some of this. He ended up getting a pretrial intervention. So there's not really a lot there. You remember saying that, those texts. Oh, this is interesting. Here, Michael White told the FBI that Mayor Anderson would text him at night when she was drunk. You said in there that the mayor would get drunk and text you. Do you remember saying that? Yes, sir. Where are those texts? Where are those texts? And then Michael White says, where are those texts? And the defense attorney says, yes, where she gets drunk and she's texting you. Where are they? Michael White says, I deleted them because they made me mad. He didn't delete all the other texts that we've been talking about. The only text he says he deleted was when he accuses Mayor Anderson of drunk texting him. He doesn't have those. I deleted them because they made me mad. So the mayor that you're claiming you have evidence against, you deleted those texts? I didn't claim I had evidence against the mayor. I just said I deleted them because it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And it just made me mad. Telling me how she's going to blast me on Facebook, blast me in the media, you know. She thought you were doing a bad job. No, if you look at one of the text messages, I think she mentioned she's going to give me a $10,000 bonus. So that text message you remember? That's what I just said. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out which text messages you remember and which ones you don't. I remember them all. Didn't you just tell the jury why you were going through this exercise? I'm sitting here saying I remember all about the mayor, about me deleting those texts, about how her said she's going to give me $10,000, but she couldn't because she was up for re-election and it would look bad. After re-election, she said she was going to give me $10,000 bonus for a good job I had done throughout the storm. Anything else you want to add? Guy Lewis is watching him go on and on. And he's watching, and he goes, anything else you want to add? I may. You remember all those texts, but you don't remember the ones where you were using the N-word or where you were talking about women in a certain way. That wasn't necessarily a text. That was just also her talking to me. Now, there's nothing in, do you remember seeing anything in that first proffer about debriefing about the Sheffield meeting? This is important. I can't remember. Well, you talked about it, right? I told him about it. So what they're talking about right now, this is huge. And this is why a jury cannot convict James Finch. This is a meeting Michael White says that he had with James Finch at Sheffield Park in 2017. He says that James Finch needed to get financing for the 17th Street ditch in 2017. That's when he said Finch called Antonius Barnes the N-word and said that he'd vote to get the financing. Only one problem. The financing had already been done the year before, and James Finch himself financed it. James Finch loaned the city nearly $5 million at 2.5% when the interest rate was more like 4%. And told the city, don't pay me till I'm done, and make your last payment to me when I'm 95 years old. 30 years. So there's a timing problem here, right? So, all right. I'm gonna go to that part here. Okay. So I could be now he's saying, why didn't you bring the documents you were supposed to bring? On and on. A little more about his blog, about the N-word. The government never asked you for the notes. Here we go. Okay. So these notes that magically appeared, it's not because after I cross-examined you, you went back and recreated some notes. No, sir, no. That never happened. It didn't happen by me. Well, did it happen by anyone else? I don't know. Those notes were not created. Those notes is what I went to with the FBI. By the way, the Sheffield Park the way I read this, tell me if I'm wrong, but you're talking to him about financing that he needed Barnes's vote for financing on the 17th Street ditch project. Here, look. Read that. See that? Who was the city manager before you? Joel Schubert. So Joel Schubert would be the one who knew, and who would have been present for if the 17th Street, if somebody said the 17th Street ditch was approved, the financing before you even came on board. No, the 17th Street ditch came on over my leadership too. Okay, but the original contracts, this is so important. The original contracts, I think the original contracts were, if I can please get out my question. Yes, sir. The original contracts were all done before you came in. I think so. Yes, sir. Meaning, why would he need to bribe Barnes to get the lower interest rate a year later on a loan that he made? Wow. Wow. The financing and the voting at the commission all done before you came in. Now Michael White's going, oh, my sentencing depends on what I say here. I mean, the prosecutors are watching me, and I just admitted that it had been taken care of the year before. Oh, snap. There was some things that had to vote on due to the fact that a portion that was not going to be covered by DEP, the 2.55% financing, all agreed on before you came in. Not on all the project, no, sir. The term of the note, all agreed in paper and presented to the commission before you ever came in, correct? I don't think so, sir. This is the prosecutor's main witness. Why are they doing this? I mean, you know what? The rest of this is just about your sentencing has been postponed like 12 times. How much restitution have you made? How much time have you spent in jail? Michael White hasn't had to, part of his deal is restitution and forfeiture. He hasn't forfeited. Margot Anderson, her husband, they took his RV. The sheriff did. The sheriff's office took his RV. For 3 years, left it in a field under the sun for 3 years. Well, they gave it back because it was a lie from beginning to end that James Finch gave Margot Anderson a motorhome. It was a lie. That's why she's got it back. How many people, when the feds seize property from you, how many people get it back? But Michael White hasn't had to give up anything. And he's the one accused of stealing money from the city. Mayor Anderson and James Finch, they were simply accused of basically steering contracts toward him, which is ridiculous. They were all recommended by staff and lawyers. They were all 5-0 votes, 4-0 votes, every one of them. It's absurd. And they weren't accused of stealing money from the city. They were accused of, Finch was accused of depriving the city honest services because he was buying off Mayor Anderson with an RV and stuff like that. All of it's been dropped. But the guy who actually did steal, no forfeitures, no restitution, no jail time. Now, his sentencing depends on how good a job he does here. Isn't that something? All right. Eventually, we're going to get these all posted for you to read yourself. But what else did I have here? Oh, this was the this was the portion where the defense attorney was trying to show the jury that, maybe Michael White might not be the most reliable witness when he says that James Finch called Antonius Barnes the N-word and was trying to get financing a year after he already had financing. Might not be the best witness, jury. And you can see there, Michael White's talking about how the devil comes to visit him and tries to suffocate him. So maybe he sees things and hears things other people don't. And then this was the other big one here. This is so, I mean, my God, this was in 2018 when Michael White's friend was upset because a woman he was seeing outside of his marriage was causing him problems. And Michael White told Assistant Chief of Police Ricky Ramey to arrest her. They arrested her for stalking, which is the thing they do, by the way. They love to arrest you for stalking. It's their go-to. And look at that line in the middle. It wasn't referring actually to setting someone up. It was referring to set her up to actually go ahead and arrest her because she wouldn't quit. Her crime, Ricky Ramey had her arrested because she wouldn't quit. Wow. And by the way, it was there was no plea deal. Again, it was pretrial intervention. She was like on probation for like 6 months because it was a bullshit charge and everybody knows it. All right. I got to wrap up. But before I do, why don't I do this again? I mean, you might as well. I might as well. There really, really is accountability coming if the voters decide in 3 weeks. Judy Tinder is running for mayor of Lynn Haven. The city needs leadership now more than ever. A mayor who serves you rather than big contractors and consultants. As mayor, she'll lead the charge for accountability, starting with the police chief, the city manager, and code enforcement. It's time once again to treat you with the respect you deserve. Vote for Judy Tinder on or before April 18th. Sorry, I realized I was muted there for a minute, but also this. Brian Gray is running for Lynn Haven City Commission Seat 1. He wants to reform code enforcement so that everyone is treated equally for once. He rejects adopting the International Property Maintenance Code. Don't turn the city into a giant HOA. Vote for Gray on or before April 18th. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I just wanted to share that with you. Pretty interesting stuff, wouldn't you agree? Also, goodness, I want to thank, you know who, the Unknown Patriot. That's who. There we go. The Unknown Patriot. Thank you so much for your support. And for those of you who haven't done it yet, the show's also on YouTube. I don't have nearly as many folks on YouTube. I don't do as much on YouTube, but you'd sure make an old man happy if you go to YouTube and subscribe and follow my YouTube page. I would love to be able to talk to more people there as well. All right. Thanks for being with me. I will see you soon.